Business, episode 7, the best time of the week. And of course, we do it twice a week. So we're very, very excited to be here with you today. Ronsley, how are you doing, my friend?
Exciting. It's always exciting to prepare for this show and kind of put stuff together and meet some new people and have chat. So I'm super excited about today's show because not only doing the show allows us to prepare for some of the presentations. We've got some cool presentations coming up. It allows me to prepare for those and the slides and the content, but it allows me to see your face that is, not with bed hair like in our meetings. So good to be here, James. Good to be here.
Well, Ronsley today, he's going to be talking about the building blocks of a binge-worthy podcast. It's going to be a really important thing to get into. We've got Livy Redden, who's our special guest. She's an incredible entrepreneur. She's got a podcast. She's got a brand new book, this one right here. She's got more than 130,000 followers on TikTok. So we're going to dive into her story and her successes so you can learn and start applying some of those things with your business and your podcast. And I'm going to be sharing the mistake for today, as we do. We finish with the mistake. So the mistake for today is a big one. It's a big misconception people have when they launch a podcast, and it's thinking that you can only get a sponsor once your podcast has launched. So we're going to share a few things on that. Livy, let's bring you in to say hi. Would love just to see your face and let us know how you're doing.
Hi everyone, I'm Livy Redden. Thank you for the introduction, James. I'm super excited to be here. I'm very passionate about podcasting, and it truly has, it was probably the best career move I ever made, starting a podcast. And at the time, I didn't realize how transformational it was going to be when I started my podcast 2 years ago, coming out as a dropout of high school and having little to no connections. And it just transformed my life in so many ways.
Yeah, podcasting, having an asset to be able to connect with a bunch of amazing people. It's such a great thing, such a great pursuit for so many reasons. So we're super excited to dive into your story. Maybe we can talk about some wins and some losses along the way, so we can keep it pretty real along the journey. Let's kick off now, as we do every time on the Podcasting for Business show. We're going to be talking about what's making news in the world of business and what's making news in the world of podcasting. To kick things off with that, I want to share a little bit about a report that just came out that's talking about YouTube for podcasting. Now, the report says that the total audience for your podcast on average, 33% of those people, from surveying all the podcasts, 33% of the audience is on YouTube. So if you have a podcast, especially if you have a video podcast already and you're not publishing it on YouTube, that's 33% of your audience that you're potentially missing out on just by sharing it on YouTube. So make sure you start implementing that. And if you'd like a link to that research paper, let us know in the comments. Ronsley, what are you seeing making news today?
Well, I've added something that was like super geeky. I'm so sorry. This is not podcast related or business related, but it is kind of like human related, because this kind of stuff happens, and sometimes we get caught up when it happens to us with our podcast and the content that we create. So live on Sky News yesterday, some intern was messing with the teleprompter and wrote Manchester United are rubbish. And as a Liverpool fan, that was the thing that made the news. So I was super excited to see that live on the news, because they say, if you see it on TV, it must be true. So that's making the news today.
I haven't entered the realm of soccer and all those things in Europe. But the one thing I do know is that the fans, they're absolute fanatics. I got friends in multiple countries who are awake at all hours watching these games and making sure everything's okay. So it's great to share that and have that passion, Ronsley. So thank you for sharing that today. The other thing that's making news that I wanted to mention is dynamic advertising on Spotify. Wild Turkey, the company, inserted an ad on a podcast for recovering alcoholics about Wild Turkey, the whiskey. So clearly that's not a good example of dynamic advertising. So they have suspended their advertising on Spotify, a horrible thing to do. Let's move into today's tactic now. Ron, so you're going to share the 4 building blocks of a binge-worthy podcast. What do you got for us?
Well, I thought instead of doing that, we might talk with Livy and have a conversation with her because, my tactic could kind of be boring with Livy just looking at my stuff. So how about we talk with Livy and first, if you don't mind, Livy, I'm super excited about the fact that you've grown this audience on TikTok, right? Because it's like the new short reel stuff, and I'm super excited to chat with you about that because how do you look at creating engaging content with the shorter video format? Like, what is your thought process that you go through to create this kind of content?
Right. That's a great question and something I feel very excited to answer. It's just something I'm very passionate about. But there are, I think, when you look at successful short form video, I think even just scrolling through TikTok and seeing what is going viral, there's such specific key things that people don't realize that are the reasons they're being engaged in certain videos. So, the key things that I do to create engaging videos is, I mean, one, you really have to learn, you have to develop the skill of talking to a camera. Like if you scroll down to my first videos on TikTok, it's okay, they're okay, but I didn't talk to the camera the way I've learned to, like it's very natural at this point. And there's a little bit of acting almost happening. Not that I'm not being authentic, but that um, you have to stop the scroll, and there's people are fighting for attention. It's not easy to get someone to be interested in you specifically. So there's a level of being slightly more animated or pulling people in, and it's very important with short form video. Learning the art of copywriting. I think that's one of the best skills anyone could learn to get good at short form video content. Is your hooks, the text you have on screen that's pulling people in. Like truly, your first 3 seconds are going to be the most impactful as far as short form video goes, and also finding some way that makes your content binge worthy. So I got big on TikTok because I was making personal development series on TikTok. So I would do like right now. I just finished a series called "How to Stop Your Overthinking in 10 Days," and
Interesting.
that was something that helped a lot of people. And it gets people to go from the For You page scrolling to my profile and binge my content. And so your whole key is yeah, to get them to stop the scroll.
Livy, that's great. I want to also give those 3 words, stop the scroll, massive for anyone who's creating and publishing that content to make sure you get the eyeballs and that engagement. Livy's just released a new book. It's an amazing read. Make sure you go and check this out. It's available on her website, livyredden.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
Go and grab a copy. Livy's a very inspirational person, entrepreneur doing all these incredible things. We're very lucky to have her here today. And talking about social media, she's got more than 3 million likes on TikTok. So she's doing an incredible job. Livy, when it comes to telling your story, like you would not have been as successful as you had have been if you were just being a rip-off, a clone of someone else that you saw out there. One of the things I love most about you and the work that you do is you are so authentic with your voice, with how that comes across. What was the journey that you went on to find that authenticity and be confident to put that out there in the world that has obviously led to having millions and millions of likes on social media?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when you're someone, and I think you do a great job at this as well, James, is when you're someone that has done the work to learn who you are authentically on your own time, it comes through on social media, and people want to be a part of that energy. And so, sure, there's marketing tactics and stop the scroll tactics that I use on social media, but I think at the end of the day, the successful creators are people that one have learned who they are authentically, and are able to get that through in their videos. And two are people that are there to genuinely help their audience. I mean, truly, my book and my podcast and my content are an expression of my soul, like a huge reason for my being and things that I love. And I just don't think that passion is something that can be faked.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited that you're a podcast host, because every podcast host knows what goes into putting out a podcast week in, week out on a regular basis. And I wonder, what has your learning curve been like, especially because you've started the podcast so that you can get, listeners, get clients, leverage the podcast. What did you wish you knew before, like when you started? Like what is the experience Livy know now that you wish you knew at the start of this whole journey of podcasting?
I think I would say I wish I would have known. I would say the importance of and I've come to learn this from as well, just the importance of doing deep background on your guests, because it's the people are taking their time to come onto your podcast, and people want to feel respected and cared for. And so I think when I started, I was doing a lot of prep work, and then I feel like it kind of fizzled out, and then I have revamped that. Because I wanted to make sure people were having the best experience they could when they came on, and the prep work shows for the listeners as well. So I would say the importance of prep work, and also not necessarily something I wish I would have known, but the growth journey of my conversation abilities and my ability to ask good questions has grown astronomically, and that's something that I take in to day-to-day situations, and it's just been such a beautiful skill to hone.
Yeah.
Having great questions, having great conversations stemming from those questions. I mean, it's huge, isn't it? Like, I interviewed a guy yesterday, a 26-year Navy SEAL who retired a couple of years ago, and he was talking a lot about imposter syndrome. I asked him, what was the moment when you felt like you were a Navy SEAL and that you were elite and that you are enough? And he said, I am still not at that point. And I was like, wow, he feels like an imposter as a 26-year Navy SEAL. I feel like an imposter interviewing this guy who feels like an imposter as a Navy SEAL. And I think that's a really important lesson, that we're all a work in progress and that we're all our own worst critics. So having that opportunity to prepare and do those things is very, very important. Livy, I'd love for you to share a little bit about the audience who you serve, and then the problems those people have, and the work that you're doing today to help those people.
Right. So the audience I'm serving specifically is young adults. Generally, I'm reaching 16 to 22 years old, and I'm helping them get unstuck and find clarity on their values and clarity on who they are, and helping improve emotional intelligence. And this is my whole goal with the young adults that I work with and that I'm working to get this content out to. Is my core belief is that if we were teaching young adults the skills of mindfulness and emotional intelligence sooner, while their brains are still very malleable, while they're just before making so many massive life decisions in their 20s, career, marriage, kids, college, moving out, money, I truly believe it would change the way society functions. Like, this is like a world-changing mission that I'm on. And I just think the power of emotional intelligence and mindfulness is something that we're looking at it more, but it's still very underrated.
It's huge, and I want to commend you on the idea, because I used to be a chef in a different lifetime, and one of my head chefs that was training me said, Ronsley, if you're trying to solve a problem that can be solved in your lifetime, you're thinking too small. So I feel like I love the way you set up your mission, because having that kind of goal, it allows you to do a lot of things. And one of the things that they say in terms of growing and being more influential in your space is not necessarily caring about what other people think about you. Have you had to go through that journey when you put out your content, where you've kind of had to like shut the inner critic inside?
Abso-freaking-lutely. I mean, I I luckily I had an experience prior to building my current account. I actually started a comedy account on TikTok in 2018 when I was in college, and um, and at the time, it was TikTok was very different. It was only 15 seconds. It was very bare bones, and the general feeling of it was very different. And I had videos on that account getting 1, 2, 3, 4 million views, and I was panicking. I remember just having so much anxiety, calling my mom, crying, like all these people are seeing me and I'm terrified and I'm getting judged. And at the time, TikTok was very location based. So they were pushing it out to people near you often. So I was getting recognized in public, and that terrified me. And although I've always been a very confident person, when you first have content reaching people on that scale, it's a very scary thing. And so it's been very cool to see the resilience and change over time of, the way hate comments bounce off me, or how if a video gets 1, 2, 3 million views now, I'm not crying or freaking out about it. It's just like a part of my job. And I'm actually excited because I'm like, awesome, my mission's getting out there. So there's definitely been a curve of learning to not panic and be okay with a lot of eyes on you.
You got to be thrown in the deep end a bit with social media, don't you? It's tough. Livy, to be out there in the world, like if you want to be able to build that trust with your audience and grow your business, you need to be producing and publishing content on a very, very regular basis. If you're comparing two people, one person's posting this video constantly and audio and all this other content constantly, and another person is not posting anything. Clearly, there's a massive discrepancy in awareness, engagement, SEO, trust, and that's going to lead to how well you grow your business versus not growing your business. So if all roads lead back to content, what tips have you got to help people create content and publish content faster?
Yeah. I would say when you're first starting out, if you're trying to build an account, or you don't have that big of a following, I would first work on um, quantity, like getting a lot out, trying to find what you like, find what works, find what seems to resonate with your community. But I at least it's got to be at least decent. Like if you're putting out poor content, it's gonna lose trust from the people that already follow you. So you definitely don't want to be doing that. But I would start with quantity, and then as your audience grows, shrink down to quality. Um, and as your business grows, I think you can put more and more quality out on a regular basis, because you can get help with that. Um, but I would say also just being very focused on what your community actually needs. I think for a long time, I uh, I was just kind of focused on what I wanted to put out there. And then once I started asking and being very involved in my comment sections and talking to people, it allowed me to get like 10x the return on the content I was putting out, because it was actually stuff people wanted to hear and the stuff that they really needed. So I think when you're listening to your audience, it allows you to get more content out because it's performing and it's resonating with people, and that's exciting. And it's definitely not all about virality and views, and we're starting to learn that as an industry, that it isn't about views, it's about community. And I think if you can go there, the community will fuel you to continue to get content out.
So you mentioned something really interesting. You said as an industry. What industry are you referring to?
I guess I would say as just like thought leaders in general, or people that are in the public eye. I don't really love the word thought leaders. You know what I mean, though. Just like
Yeah.
as content creators and just people that are working to create like a public view of themselves, I guess, towards a certain mission.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of us out there that have gotten to a point where what was set out as the plan is not the plan anymore for our lives, because we've kind of evolved and started to do something different and create content and do whatever. For me, it was starting a podcast 8 years ago and getting to 1 million listeners in like 4 months. It was like, whoa, what happened here? And then from there, taking that, I never in my lifetime could have thought that I make money from my voice, because even though I spoke English my whole life, when I came to Australia, my English didn't sound like everyone else's here. So I had this whole complex about the way I sounded. So now to think about creating content from my voice is absolutely mental. With your growth, right? How have you added products or added services or added value to your audience in a way that benefited the business, that benefited the growth? Because more profit equals more things that you can do, better content that you can put out, better stuff for the community as a whole. How have you monetized these views and this attention that you've gotten?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways content creators can monetize, and starting out, I would just do brand deals here and there. And then, I started working on having a way to, actually own my audience, because TikTok is kind of a finicky, fleeting audience, just because they're not seeing every video you put out. And it's just very fast paced. So if you can get them off the app and providing things that actually have value, that I can use to build, email lists, text lists, and that sort of thing. But my main goal isn't just to like get their email or get their phone number. It's to give them something that actually has value. So that's getting to a point where I own a good chunk of my audience, and then going from there. I was doing one-on-one mindset coaching, and after doing sessions for a few months, I realized it wasn't really the route I wanted to go on. And I think especially working with young adults, a one-on-one environment can be really intimidating.
Yeah.
And so now, I've redirected and am working on building out 2 different group programs now, and there's just a lot of it's also hard, and I think a lot of people probably have this struggle of knowing what exactly you want to offer as far as monetizing, and what your audience wants most. And I think that's still something I'm figuring out.
Aren't we all, Livy? Aren't we all? Such great advice. Make sure you go to Livy's website, livyredden.com. Check her out on TikTok at Livy Redden as well. She's putting out some amazing content. Again, here's a brand new book. It's an incredible read. So go and grab a copy of this on Livy's website, livyredden.com. We're going to go into the big mistake now. Livy, we'd love for you to stick around and get your thoughts on this mistake, as well as a tactic that Ronsley is going to share afterwards, if you're up for that. The mistake we have today is mistake number 61. Now, we have collated the 70 mistakes that business owners make with their podcast. If you would like a copy of that, drop a comment below and the team will send it to you, or you can go to mistakes.wearepodcast.com. Either comment or go to mistakes.wearepodcast.com and you can download the full list of 70 mistakes as well as the top 10 biggest mistakes that business owners make with their podcast and how to fix them. We'll include some very specific action items that you can take to correct those mistakes very quickly. Mistake 61 is thinking that you can only get a sponsor for your podcast once the show has launched. Now, I think there needs to be a bit of a definition change around exactly what a sponsor is. Because if you're really after a sponsor in a traditional sense, you're essentially establishing a relationship that is going to be based on metrics. Whenever you have a episode come out, they're going to want to know how many people listen to it, how many people click through, how many people entered this coupon code. And every single episode, you're going to be on this hamster wheel. And eventually they're not going to be as happy with the analytics. You're going to be frustrated with all of the things and the comms that you need to provide them. It's very, very stressful to do that. And it's just not an organic way of having a friendship or a relationship or a partnership. And that's what we encourage you to do. We want you to think about, instead of finding a sponsor for your show, find a partner for your show. Instead of a sponsor, find a partner. Because if you're looking for a traditional sponsor, something like a Harry's Razors, and your show is completely different, why are you in such a rush to send people away from your ecosystem down to some different company's ecosystem? So either create products yourself or find a partner where the mission is a shared mission and you're focused on what activities we can do together that's going to further that mission and have the impact that you want to have along the way. And to let these brands know that you have a podcast launching very, very soon and you're trying to find a like-minded company who want to have a buy into that impact. They want to have the impact that you want to have. And that's what you want to do with your show, and brainstorm ways to collaborate and really help people through their transformations. That's a really great way to do it. That is so much better to establish a friendship through a partnership for the long term versus seeking a sponsor that's more transactional and only focused on the short term. There's a very big difference in the way that most people run sponsors. So we wanted to share a little bit with that there. So Ronsley, Livy, do you have any thoughts on partners versus sponsors and or any of the things I just shared there?
Well, my first thought is I love the idea about changing from from sponsor to partner, but understanding the fact that this partner will pay you money to advertise on your show. And so they are sponsors, but they are partners in the sense that they share your mission. Now, when we were talking with Livy earlier, she said something super interesting about her industry. Like, she's actually taking responsibility of the whole industry when she's talking about her content, which makes it easy for industry partners to come on board with the same vision that Livy has. So when Livy's talking about bettering her industry, if someone has been in the industry for a while, especially a lot of these companies that have been around for years and haven't gotten a grasp of online digital content, following, marketing, etc., they'd be going, well, here is a mission I'd like to get behind. Now, that's what we're referring to. Now, with Livy's track record, if she starts a podcast right now, even her current podcast, she goes to her industry and says, hey, for the next 10 podcasts, I'm taking a sponsor. But my mission is that these 10 podcasts are focused on this kind of personal development. And if you care about that, then I'm only taking one sponsor to like mention on these 10 episodes. And they're not in the same price range as per clicks, but it's a different sort of deal that you create with this partner that allows them to be sponsors on your podcast, but also allows you to represent your mission more broadly.
Yeah, it's the difference. Livy, any thoughts on that?
The only thing I would add to that, I mean, I think I love the idea of partnerships versus sponsorships. I actually wrote it down as James was saying that. But I myself, I don't have sponsorships or do any sort of like ad reads on my podcast. But I will say, my experience working with brands as far as brand deals go. I think a lot of uh, content creators try and just find as many brands as they can to do, especially I think people that are in like fashion or makeup and they can do a lot of stuff with products. Um, they kind of just try and get whoever. And something I've done that I think has really paid off is only working with the brands that I really love and would genuinely want to create a deep, long-lasting relationship with. And pretty much all the brands that I've worked with, and given everything I had into those brand deals, have connected me with someone or been like, hey, we're going to reach out again for another partnership. And so as far as even just brand deals go, I think focusing on partnerships instead of just a one-time hit is really important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you're looking at ways of collaborating, that's where you move away from that commoditized offer where you might only be able to generate, say it's 50 cents for every single person that goes to your website, and maybe it's 10% or a specific dollar sum for anyone who proceeds with a transaction as a result of going through your process to that landing page. If you move away from that commoditized offer towards an irresistible offer, through collaboration where you can come up with things that are a much higher price point and much more valuable, you're going to be remunerated so much better. You can do 5 figures a month before you even launch your show, rather than fighting over the scraps, not to mention the time it takes to go and find this sponsor for nothing. So that's the big mistake. Again, if you would like to go and download a copy of the 10 biggest mistakes business owners make with their podcast, drop a comment and we'll send that out to you. It's a free download. And you can also go to mistakes.wearepodcast.com. Now we're going to talk about today's tactic. And I'm very, very excited for this. I know that Livy is very, very excited for this. And speaking of excited, Ronsley, what have you got for us, mate? You've got to have something good for us on today's tactic.
This is my excited face. I'm joking.
I'm as excited as Ronsley gets. Now, I want to mention something before. You said you used to be a chef, and Ronsley is still a very, very capable individual in the kitchen. So I'm going to refer to you as a chef in the present tense rather than in the past tense.
Ah, yes, one of those things. Because I even called myself that I used to be a software engineer, and Rochelle keeps reminding me that I still have my registration from the Institute of Engineers, so I'm supposed to call myself an engineer. Anyway, let's not get into that. Let's get into today's tactic, which is the building blocks of a binge-worthy podcast. Now, I get asked this a lot, like, hey, Ronsley, how can I create a podcast that get people to actually listen to it, but more importantly, build trust, get clients, and make it more leverageable? So I've created the 1, 2, 3, 4 for every podcast episode. So I'm going to explain that in the best possible way from this framework. So every episode that you have when you're putting out a binge-worthy podcast needs to have one call to action, needs to have at least 2 calls to engagement, needs to have 3 unique questions, and 4 subtopics. Now, I'll break all this stuff down so that you understand what I'm referring to. But when you putting out content and you putting out your podcast, I'm really curious to know what is the most engaging segment of your show. I know James at the end of his show, he has his rapid fire fast round, I think he calls it, but I think that's the most engaging segment of his show, because if he doesn't do it, some people ask him, you didn't do that segment in particular. So what segments, if you have a podcast and you have a business and you're listening here, what segment of your show is most engaging for your audience? All right. So let me break down what is a call to action. A call to action is where you ask your audience to do something. All right. So every podcast episode should have only one call to action. So for me, I'll give you some examples here. I'm just putting an example here. Like I would say, if I'm putting out this show, the Podcasting for Business, episode 7, the only thing that I'd really want anyone to do on this show is go to mistakes.wearepodcast.com and get the mistakes, because then I know that, first of all, I know that you care about getting clients. I know that you care about growing your listeners. And I know you care about creating a podcast that you can leverage and use to create more opportunities for your business. So because of that, you don't want to make some really easy mistakes that we have seen people make because they don't know how to translate going from business owner to podcaster and content creator. So it's a simple download. So if you go there and you get that download, I know that you find it valuable, but I also know that you are in a position that I could get you on my show. I could get you on the Podcasting for Business, and I can interview you on how you're using your podcast. So if that is who you are, just reach out to us, DM us, so that we can get you onto the show. But so that's the call to action. The second one is 2 call to engagements, because this is the thing that most business owners forget: how to include your audience, how to engage your audience with the content that you create. So here are a couple of examples for this show. So I asked, how do you engage your audience? I already asked you that. But I would also ask the audience right now listening, what are the segments of the show that your audience loves, which I've asked. And then I also ask you now, when you're creating your content, how do you engage your audience? Like, what is it that you do to get your audience to say, oh, I understand what you're saying, but I do it this way? What do you do if someone disagrees with what you've put out? How do you refine your audience? So getting your audience to engage with the content you've just created is key. Finally, I'm going to rush into this 3 unique questions and 4 subtopics, because when you create a podcast, it's really important to create a podcast that people can consume. So if you can create a podcast that answers 3 unique questions, and then you break it up into subtopics that people can consume, then it becomes easy for them to want to consume it because they know what's coming up. For example, this show has 4 subtopics. It's got the news, we've got a tactic, which we're covering right now, we've got an interview, which we did with Livy, and we've got a mistake that business owners make, which we've covered. Unique questions, like if I wanted to say to you, hey, we just did a Podcasting for Business episode with Livy Redden, and we covered how to create engaging content with video. We covered how she went from 0 to 130,000 odd followers on TikTok and over 3 million plus likes. And we covered how to create content with confidence and consistency. If you'd like to watch that, go to this link. So I already have the unique questions that I've already asked Livy, so I can create the intro. And now you have the building blocks of creating a binge-worthy podcast so that your audience knows what's coming up on your show, so they can be part of the show, and you're not just creating content that is just not getting to people. I hope that made sense. I'm keen to hear from the team what made sense from all of that.
Ronsley drops the mic and backs away slowly to the the kitchen. Livy, any thoughts on that? You've been a podcaster for a while. What came to mind when Ronsley went through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great way to break it down, and I think I have subconsciously done it, but not done it in such an organized manner. And I think especially having an engaging, like doing rapid fire questions or something like that, having a very engaging piece of the podcast has been, because I do something very similar on my own, and I know a lot of listeners enjoy it. But I think also something that I would like to incorporate more on my own podcast is doing something that has a bit more of like subtopics, like Ronsley talked about in that final section of the 4 subtopics. I think that's a great way to have a little bit more structure and really give the most value you can to your audience.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Ronsley's productions with the podcast as well are unparalleled. They're incredible. I've had people recently for my rock around. I don't know what's happened like in the last month, but I'm having really high level entrepreneurs who are rocking up with like a notepad where they've been, because the only thing that I send to them beforehand, like ahead of time, are the rocket round questions. Because I got a couple of things in there that I don't want to catch them off guard with, like what quote inspires you the most, and what's one vulnerability that has now become your superpower. They're the two main ones that I want to make sure they're aware of beforehand. But when you've got these really influential people rock up and halfway through the interview, they pull out this book, this notepad or this sheet of paper, it's really quite hilarious to see. So I really appreciate the time they've taken to go and do that. But having the rocket round about 3/4 of the way through enables us to cover a lot of ground, a lot of really interesting things that I'm thinking about in terms of a lead magnet down the future. In terms of a lead magnet, what's an additional way that I can add value to my community? An example of that is, what book do you gift the most? That's a question that I ask them. So as of right now, I have a 40-page PDF that every single guest who has come on my show, every book that they have recommended on the show, can be downloaded. It shares what the book is, what they said about it, an Amazon affiliate link to go and purchase it, and a link to the YouTube episode, the audio episode, and the URL for the written version, the blog version of the episode. Having all of those things through the questions that you add at the end, other ones like what quote inspires you the most. There's some great stuff in there. The Navy SEAL who I interviewed yesterday, he recited the full Man in the Arena poem from Teddy Roosevelt, and he does it with his 8-year-old daughter when he drops her to school. Every morning they rename it to the person in the arena, but they go through it. It's like their warrior chant as he drops her off. I'm like, I was ready to run through a wall just watching him do that as he stared down the barrel of the camera through the podcast. It was so cool.
Well, that particular poem is just, it gets, I for the longest time I used to have it up on my wall, and it used to, it's a great, it's like doing the haka before a game. It's literally like you're right, you can run through walls once you embed the meaning behind that poem inside you, for sure.
Absolutely. I'm trying to find a bit in the background so I can actually, so I can share a bit of it. It's basically, the essence is the credit belongs to the person who is in the arena. If you are a content creator and a business owner, which you are because you're watching this show or listening to this show, you need to have the pride of being in there and recognize that you are going to be opening yourself up to these criticisms of other people. But if you're serious about growing your business and growing your podcast and having the impact that you want to have, you need to be stronger and more resilient. So the want and desire that you have for the goals that you have for your business and for your life can outweigh any of the doubts that these critics are going to throw your way. These are the people who are not doing what you're doing. The criticisms and judgments generally come from people who have never tasted your level of success and have never even got out of their comfort zone to give that a try. So that should give you a lot of hope and support for all the people out there, all the business owners and podcasters who continue to rock up and deliver that transformation for an audience of people that you're passionate about, and every time you hit record on your podcast. I think we're going to leave it there for today. Livy, can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Again, everyone go and check out Livy on TikTok, Livy Redden. She's on Instagram. Her website's livyredden.com. Livy's everywhere. She's crushing it. She always brings such a great energy and an absolute wealth of knowledge. So, Livy, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, Livy, thank you.
Thank you. It was great. I love it.
Yeah.
And if you would like a copy of our 10 mistakes that business owners make with your podcast, just comment mistakes below or go to mistakes.wearepodcast.com and we will send that out to you. It's a free download. And the 4 building blocks of a binge-worthy podcast that Ronsley shared, I mean, this was a value-packed episode. I think I've really delivered this time in episode 7, and I think it's all due to Livy's presence. So, Livy, please join us anytime. But everyone else out there, if there's anything that we can do to help you grow your business using a podcast, just let us know and join us in exactly 48 hours time, 47 hours time for episode 8 of Podcasting for Business.
See you, team.